Good morning, I'm Jim Murphy, President of Grow Forward. We're here today to talk with another innovator, business leader, person in the Chicago community that's bringing something special to us, Gary Lazarski of MightyVine. We're very excited to have you here, and tell us a little bit about growing up and where you're from and how you got into the start in this world.
Sure, I grew up in Mount Prospect, a northwest suburb. I've been in Chicago my whole life. Had a brief detour into Michigan as part of my tour of the Big Ten and undergraduate in law school, and then ended up back here in the securities trading markets for a while. A little over a decade ago, met up with some local industry leaders in various areas and started a couple of companies, and that's led over time to my being CEO of MightyVine, which is a hydroponic tomato farm out in Rochelle, just west of the city.
Talk to us a little bit about MightyVine. Maybe some of our viewers don't understand the differences, the basic differences between hydroponic and growing in soil, greenhouse versus organic. Maybe give us a little history, a little lesson in that.
Sure. Well, I think the place to start is with the tomatoes that we've eaten for the last several decades in the Chicago area. You've worked in the Loop, I know, for a lot of your career, and you go out to lunch at places, and the tomatoes that you're routinely served in any salad or on any sandwich just have no flavor. So we started at MightyVine by asking ourselves, what can we do to change that? And it turns out the reason that they taste terrible is for very good economic reasons. The entire tomato growing and a lot of produce growing industry was predicated upon the fact that you grow it where it's nice and sunny. Gasoline is cheap in the United States. We're very lucky. So you grow it in California or maybe even Mexico or further away, ship it across the United States to wherever it's consumed. There you have what looks like a tomato, but it doesn't taste anything like a tomato. So by growing hydroponically, what we're able to do at MightyVine is bring the flavor back to locally grown tomatoes in Chicago. And we're focused on the Chicago market. There are people that do this in various places. We felt that Chicago was very underserved when it came to top quality produce. We chose the tomato partly because tomatoes just don't travel well. You cannot grow a very flavorful tomato anywhere except close to home. So our greenhouse is located just outside Chicago, well known to be a great restaurant community, and we've been very pleased with the way restaurants have responded to our high quality, high flavor tomato that's available year round.
What size of greenhouse do you have? My grandmother and grandfather had a greenhouse when I was growing up in their backyard. I remember it very well. What size is yours?
Yeah, most of us have memories of going maybe on Mother's Day at the last minute to buy our mother flowers, or maybe a prom corsage or something of that nature. That's a different kind of greenhouse entirely. This is 15 acres, so approximately 15 football fields under glass, 30-foot ceilings at the peak, bumblebees to pollinate. It's a very high-tech, state-of-the-art greenhouse that comes to us from the Netherlands, where they've really developed this technology. So we were fortunate enough to partner with some Dutch growers, and they were able to bring their technology and know-how right here to the Midwest and help us produce great tasting tomatoes for Chicago.
How many local people do you employ, and how do they like the work?
Yeah, that's a big part of our story, I think. We currently employ close to 70 on our 15 acres, all people who live and work in the Rochelle area, which at one time was an agricultural and commercial hub. It's a rail hub. Like many towns of its kind in the upper Midwest, it's gone on hard times for the last few decades, and we were able to bring next generation agricultural production back to a plot of land that had previously had all the topsoil stripped for development. So they were going to put a warehouse there. Those plans fell through with the economic crisis in 2007, 2008. We were able to repurpose that land for agriculture again by using our hydroponic system to grow tomatoes. So it's a great story for the community. And we find the consumers really take to that story because it allows them to connect to an agricultural concern right in their own community.
One of the big things in the marketplace today is the concept of sustainability. People are very interested in that, and it's important to them. How is it that MightyVine embraces that? What are the few of the technology points that MightyVine uses or has in their systems that incorporate sustainability as a concept?
Yeah, sustainability is definitely not just a buzzword for us at MightyVine. It's something that we take very seriously, both from a business perspective and as being good community stewards. We use 10% of the water at MightyVine that you would use if we were a field-grown tomato. So for instance, you're familiar probably with conventionally grown tomatoes. You apply a lot of water and fertilizer, you apply a lot of pesticide. Many of those negative elements drain down into the water table and create problems in our communities. At MightyVine, our hydroponic technology allows us to capture all the rainwater and snowmelt off the roof, recirculate that into the greenhouse. Everything is applied directly to the roots. So not only are we using 10% of the water of field-grown tomatoes, none of the water in our greenhouse is filtering down into the water table. So none of the nutrients we use, none of the fertilizers are getting into the surrounding water table. So it's a great, sustainable way to produce local produce of high flavor.
Do you have to wash your tomatoes a lot before they go to the stores?
We don't. We don't wash our tomatoes. They're not handled as much as typical tomatoes that you'd get from a conventionally grown farm. We've all seen food safety warnings about food grown either in Mexico or California, recalls, things of that nature. Because of the cleanliness of the Dutch process that we use, our tomatoes really from a food safety perspective are fantastic. In addition to that, we work with a lot of retailers who demand extensive food safety standards be in place. So we submit ourselves twice a year to a third-party food safety audit to make sure that everything from the way we handle our nutrients to the way we grow our tomatoes to the way they're picked, packed, and shipped is all meeting the top food safety standards.
One of the benchmarks of Grow Forward is the concept of food and nutrition. What have you learned over the last few years about your tomatoes and nutrition compared to the others in the marketplace?
Well, what we're able to do at MightyVine is leave our tomatoes on the vine a little longer. You're getting a tomato that's going a great distance. It's going to be picked when it's green and hard. And in those last few days or even week on the vine, instead of traveling in a train somewhere where it's not developing any of its nutrition or flavor profiles, the MightyVine tomato is still happily snug to the vine, being tended by the bees and the various other natural biological aids that we have in the greenhouse, and developing all of the nutrients and flavors that we know from the tomatoes in our backyards of our grandparents growing up. So the nutrient profile, the flavor profile, the sweetness, everything is enhanced when you're able to leave the tomato on the vine. And by virtue of our proximity to the Chicago market, we're able to do that.
Talk to me about how the food service community in Chicago has embraced your product.
Yeah, we've been very pleased with the way the food service and the restaurant community and the retailers have embraced our product. Chicago is well known to be a fantastic restaurant town. A lot of James Beard, the most recent James Beard Award winner, Rick Bayless, for his groundbreaking restaurant and his work with introducing Mexican food, a broad array of styles of Mexican food to the United States. So the restaurant community has been overwhelming in their response. Even the restaurants that are part of the local food movement, where they really only want to cook what's in season, typically would make an exception because it's such a strong consumer demand for tomatoes. They would have a tomato on in the winter, even if it wasn't locally sourced, and they did it somewhat regretfully. What we've been able to do is give them the ability to put on their tables a tomato that meets their standards year-round. So we've been very gratified by the fact, we got into business looking to solve a problem, why tomatoes taste so bad in Chicago, but you never really know until you put it out there whether the public's going to agree with you. And we've been very happy to see that the restaurant community has embraced the tomato, our tomato, put it on their menus, and done some very creative things with it, even in the depths of winter. So it's been great.
The produce market in Chicago is a pretty large, substantial marketplace. There's a lot of different products there. A lot of our retailers are used to going to the produce market and buying their product there. Right. How does MightyVine handle that in terms of how does the relationship with the retailers in particular differ from the ones that just go to the produce market and buy what's on sale?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been something that's been part of our learning curve at MightyVine. The commodity tomato market in Chicago is very strong. It's a regional hub for produce trading. Some of that is quality produce, but a lot of it, particularly tomatoes, is stuff that is just, it's there because it's available and it's cheap, but it doesn't have the high flavor that we expect and that we need in a tomato. So we try to stay out of the commodity market and build our brand, work with restaurants and retailers to communicate to our buying public that a locally grown, high-flavor tomato is worth paying a little bit more for. So some of our retailers will find that they can walk to the Chicago International Produce Terminal and find tomatoes for, very cheap certain times of year. But time and again, they come back to us with the same orders week after week because in the grocery store, the consumer is voting with their pocketbook. And they're saying, I'd rather pay $1.99 or $2.49 a pound for a tomato that tastes great than 99 cents a pound for something that doesn't even approximate what a tomato is supposed to taste like.
What are some of the more interesting new technology you're seeing coming out of the Netherlands?
As we talked about with the hydroponics, the Netherlands really is, necessity is the mother of invention. And so the Netherlands for centuries has been very inventive, given that they're below sea level in a lot of their geography. So they've been very entrepreneurial about coming up with ways to grow flowers, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. What we're seeing coming out of the Netherlands now that a lot of people are interested in, and I believe you may have spoken with a guest, microgreens, using LED lighting to be even more sustainable than we currently are. New ways of treating the glass that's used in the greenhouse to more effectively spread out the solar radiation that hits the greenhouse. All of it's geared towards giving the growers, and these growers are just master craftsmen with generations in their family of growing. It gives the grower greater ability to control the environment and produce ultimately the best tasting tomato, pepper, or whatever produce you're growing.
You've put a couple bottles of juice here on the table. What is this all about?
That's right. So this is a local company, Here Foods, LLC. Their Here Juice line is available in a number of local retailers. And what they're doing is something that we strongly support. They're taking Midwest produce, cold pressing it into some really high quality juices. This particular one has tomato, that's why it's here. MightyVine tomatoes, cucumber, various other things, a little bit of cayenne. I find it's just a great morning juice, and we're really happy to partner with local folks who are doing innovative things like this. A lot of the juices you see, again, the produce is coming from you don't really know where. And not only do we appreciate people like Here Juice for using local produce because it's good for the community, but we've seen time and time again that the consumer likes the connection with community. So you know that everything in this bottle, including the MightyVine tomatoes, was grown from within a place that you could drive to and see with your kids or your family on the weekend.
Mm-hmm. What are MightyVine's future plans? You're going to grow more tomatoes? You're going to grow other things? What do you think?
It's only been about 1.5 years since we picked our first tomato, so in industry terms, we're relatively young. Right now, what we're looking to do is service and grow our existing accounts, make sure we maintain the quality. We expanded from 7.5 acres in our first year to 15 acres in the past year. So for 2017, we're going to continue to try to perfect our ability to grow, pack, and ship the best tasting tomato in the market. And as far as what the future holds, I think we'll let the market dictate that. Consumers have voted, as I said, with their pocketbook for MightyVine tomatoes. And if there are other things that retailers are telling us we can do hydroponically, grow nearby for the supermarkets and the restaurants, we'll take a hard look at all of that and develop the right expertise.
Great chatting with you and getting caught up on MightyVine. Have I missed any points or forgotten anything?
The tomatoes are available at Local Foods, which is this beautiful setting where you're conducting the interview, and a lot of other local retailers. I think you haven't missed anything. I would just encourage anybody who likes MightyVine or who sees us out in the market to reach out to us through the internet. Let us know how we're doing, what we can do better, and if there are any other produce items that you really think we should be growing.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
All right.